Welcome back to Askewed Reviews. And this week I'm doing the entire Tremors film series. So today it's the 2001 film Tremors 3 Back to Perfection. Here is your trivia question for today. At the end of the film, who offers the highest bid for the last ass blaster? The answer will be at the end of this episode. So our film starts off in Argentina, where a graboid has made its way south from Mexico and has already moved on to the next stage of creating shriekers. So, of course, they reach out to none other than Burt Gummer to take all of them out. Once Burt mows them all down with a turret gun, he finally decides to head back to Perfection, Nevada. Back in Perfection, some things have changed since the first film. For instance, Walter Chang's market is now run by his niece, Jody Chang. Jody has decided to take it upon herself to make Perfection into the graboid capital of the world, at least when it comes to merchandise. In the store, you can now find things like pot holders, mugs, lunchboxes, and even comic books. Now, some of the more recent changes that have happened to Perfection is a realty company called Perfection Valley Ranchettes has moved in and is now trying to buy up all the land. There's also a new safari tour called Desert Jack's Graboid Adventure, which is run by Jack, and what he does is he takes people out along the valley, showing them the different spots where the graboids attacked. And now, of course, when everyone in Perfection is feeling safe, that's when the graboids come back. Now, the worst part about this for Bert and the gang is they've been around long enough that they've gone past the stage of being shriekers and have now become something new. So not only can these creatures still see in infrared, but they can now propel themselves into the air by creating an explosion that shoots out of their butt. So with Bert, Jack, Jody, and the rest of the town working together, can they manage to fend off or defeat this new menace, which has been given the name of Ass Blasters? The director for this film was Brent Maddock, who, by the way, has been one of the writers since the first film. In fact, he is partnered with S.S. Wilson as the writer for all three of them, and Wilson was the director on the last film. The very first Tremors film is actually the shortest in the series, and this third one, Back to Perfection, is the longest. Back to Perfection was actually the movie that ended up spawning the 2003 television series. The series, by the way, is technically not considered canon. And at least in my own opinion, I did not think the television series was very good. Michael Gross as Burt Gummer and Robert Jane as Melvin Plug are the only actors that reprised their roles for the television series. This third Tremors film is the first time that Burt Gummer is the main character. This also happens to be Michael Gross's favorite Tremors movie. The character of Desert Jack is played by Sean Christian, but apparently the role almost went to Nick Stable or Brian Krause. The role of Jody Chang is played by Suzanne Chuang, and just like how her uncle in the film Walter Chang came up with the name Graboids, Jody is the one who came up with the name Ass Blasters. So the name Shriekers never actually is said in the second film where they first appear, but it is highly believed that it was Grady who ends up coming up with that name. Speaking of Grady, we apparently find out that the reason why we don't see Earl or him in this film is because they've apparently created an amusement park based off of the Graboids. We actually get quite a few of the returning cast from the first film in this one, including Charlotte Stewart as Nancy, Ariana Richards as Mindy, Tony Gennaro as Miguel, and Robert Jane as Melvin. Another returning cast member from the first film is John Pappas. In this movie, he plays Agent Charlie Rusk, but in the first film, he was one of the road workers. There's also a really quick cameo from Michael Gross's sister, Mary Gross, who actually plays the character of the tourist mom that says, "Thank you, Mr. Goober." So even though I absolutely wish these comic books were real, they are not. They do, in fact, have the Dark Horse Comics logo, but that's because apparently Dark Horse from time to time is willing to produce comic book covers for movies. In case you were wondering what the three comic book covers really look like, here we have Shriekers, Graboids, and Graboids versus Shriekers. You may or may not have noticed this, but Jody does in fact have a memorial to her Uncle Walter right above the front door of the market. You know this point in the film where Bert throws an explosive over the side of a hill, hoping to blow up a bunch of the Shriekers? Well, in the original script, They were actually going to have it be his cannon that he refers to in the first film instead of an explosive. Bert states that the watch that he has in the film has an ultrasonic frequency that is synced to the cesium clock in Colorado. This is not actually true. The watch, however, is known as the Storm Navigator, and it has a compass, it reads temperature in Celsius, and it has a light up indicator. The albino graboid in the film, nicknamed El Blanco, is supposed to be a reference to the novel Moby Dick. In fact, when Bert sees it, he even makes a quote from the book of, "Call me Ishmael." So the city of Perfection in the first film has a population of 14. In this film, the population is now 5. This would include Bert, Jody, Nancy, Mindy, and Miguel. Jack, by the way, does not live in Perfection. My assumption is that he's from Bixby, which is supposedly the closest town. Also, here's something else that I noticed that's random and interesting. Apparently, the graboids must have really messed up the valley, as the elevation has changed from 2135 to 2835 from the first film to this one. So there was actually going to be a spin-off video game from this film that was being worked on by Rock Solid Games. In fact, Michael Gross and Sean Christian from this film had done some voiceover work for it, along with Frank Welker and Keith David, but unfortunately the project was dropped. This movie primarily takes place in Nevada, but was completely filmed in California. So when it comes to the film Tremors 3 Back to Perfection, I still do like this film. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as the first two, and especially because Bert, in my opinion, is really the only likable character throughout the film. Also, I was not a fan of the fact that they started to lean on CGI instead of the practical effects that made the first two so good. So I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 5. Now, if you did enjoy this movie, other films I recommend checking out are Eight Legged Freaks, any of the Critters films, Pitch Black, or The Mist. Now it's time for the trivia question from the beginning of this episode. At the end of the film, who offers the highest bid for the last ass blaster? So by the end of the film, Mindy and Nancy have managed to capture the last ass blaster, and they're on the phone speaking to potential buyers. And who ends up putting the highest bid for an exotic animal? Well, of course, it's Siegfried and Roy. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews. And if there's a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments.